Every year, at the end of the year, I make this video, and the Xbox 360 continues to persist. Some things have changed in the past few years, namely the fact that Games with Gold was discontinued for the Xbox 360, which was disappointing to a lot of people because you went from getting 4 free games a month to 2. You would think maybe that would improve the quality of these free games a little bit to bring them up to the PlayStation Plus level of quality for their free games, but it seemingly did not. And honestly, I think Games with Gold in the Xbox 360 could have ended quite a while ago, considering that many of these games were being repeated, and they'd already been Games with Gold past years. I know people are coming to the Xbox platform every single day. If I came to PlayStation, I would love if they reran, Final Fantasy VII's remake as one of their PlayStation Plus games, but they don't seem to repeat nearly as frequently as Microsoft was repeating with the Xbox 360 games, so I would say that it made sense that that program would come to an end eventually, but that does not mean that the online infrastructure of the Xbox 360 is anywhere near gone. In fact, because it's very similar and actually reliant on a lot of the same things that are powering the Xbox One and the Xbox Series infrastructure for its online components, it's likely we'll continue to see the Xbox 360 online service continue to persist for years and years to come. And of course, Microsoft has removed online functionalities from some of their own games, even something like Halo Reach, which was tremendously popular. It makes sense that they removed that, considering that it has been dwarfed, it has been replaced by the Master Chief Collection on Xbox One and the Xbox Series consoles. And I think that's the way that it's more likely online play is going to go on the Xbox 360. Over time, we'll see more and more games on an individual basis remove their online functionalities from their older titles and then make them be unplayable on the Xbox 360. But you take a look at all of those Call of Duty games, still have some activity because they're backwards compatible on the Xbox One, because people want to go back and play Black Ops 2, and of course there are going to be hackers in those lobbies. They're not very well moderated whatsoever because they're such an old game, but the fact of the matter is online play continues to exist for those titles, and of course those are more peer-to-peer based, and it makes sense why that would continue running. But when it's on an individual game-by-game basis, you could argue that PlayStation 2 multiplayer maybe never really came to an end. I mean, games had, especially GameSpy games, had their servers active for quite a long time because the PlayStation 2 had this decentralized sense of an online community where each individual game required its own sort of online access, or at least the GameSpy ones were maybe all grouped together, and maybe your EA ones were all kind of grouped together, but they didn't have, that community sort of all-in-one login that you have with something like Xbox Live, which that dashboard, those messaging functions, the party functions are still active and available to use, and that's really impressive because we're coming up on nearly 20 years later, and in fact 2025, which will be the 20th anniversary of the Xbox 360, crazy that we're that close to it already, is kind of a big year for the system because it's going to make the calendar function or the date function on the system, I've heard, become unusable. Like, the calendar for the system ends in 2025. That's why people have speculated that the Xbox 360 will reach its demise in 2025. This is just kind of like a Y2K issue. This is like when all the computers were going to reach their end in 2000 and then they didn't. They'll have a solution for this, even if it's something as dumb as just resetting the calendar so that at the end of 2025 it kicks back to 2006 and we just restart the entire thing over again. It'll be something. It's not going to have, the entire Xbox 360 infrastructure come crumbling down because of a date issue. I think it's also worth noting that the Xbox 360 in other parts of the world is still kind of a big deal. The same goes for the PlayStation 3. I think that if you're, in North America, particularly in America, you probably are taking that a little bit for granted. You've moved on to things like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series, but you have to remember how long the PlayStation 2 stuck around in South America, and something like the PlayStation 3 or the Xbox 360 is going to do the same thing. I mean, they are still updating rosters on older Pro Evolution and FIFA titles on the PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation 3 because those are the systems that are more widely available in South America. People don't want to spend months worth of income on purchasing a game console. They just simply cannot do that, and there is that issue in other parts of the world that maybe we don't automatically think about living in North America. So while you may think the Xbox 360 is an old console long past its prime, other people in other parts of the country may think differently. But I think it's also worth exploring the fact that Xbox Live Gold still costs $60, even if if you're just going to play on an Xbox 360. And spending that much money in a year to play games online on this old of a console seems like a real drawback, especially when you compare it to what it's up against the PlayStation 3 from that time period, which never had an online subscription price, and you can still play games online on the PlayStation 3 for free. I will periodically go back and play some Call of Duties on there, especially Call of Duty Ghosts, still relatively active. You know, maybe you get 1,000 players in, especially at night. So, I mean, it's playable to get into a TDM game on a PlayStation 3 copy of Call of Duty Ghosts without a membership. And I think that makes more sense if you're going to be playing, you know, in a different part of the country where cost is a big aspect. I would go with the PlayStation 3, even though Sony has kind of virtue signaled that they do want to move on from the PlayStation 3 and they want to kind of close out both the online store and the online functionality for it. And because I don't know how all the Sony stuff is necessarily set up, maybe it's not, you know, as baked into the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 PSN as we have with the Xbox 360, Xbox Live, overlapping very heavily into the Xbox One and the Xbox Series, which really just makes the Xbox consoles a better investment maybe for the long term when you consider the fact that even an Xbox One, which the VHS style fat model is relatively inexpensive these days, maybe around $100, $150, can play discs. I've talked about before, that's going to give you some serious discounts on some of the earlier titles from the generation, is a system that will probably stick around and have online functionality for decades, maybe, I mean a long time. And obviously the Xbox One is much more modernized of a console than the Xbox 360. I mean, you have all those streaming apps that are available on the system, so as a casual gamer, the Xbox One, because of the way Microsoft has overlapped their infrastructure so that all these systems are probably going to be supported for the long run, is a very good deal. And the 360 is nothing to scoff at either. Obviously, they've discontinued support for many of the streaming apps on the 360, and I'm sure more will come relatively soon as, you know, technology just kind of moves on, and as the sign-in security for some of these apps, especially just Microsoft's own sign-in security, becomes unable to really work with what the Xbox 360 is capable of. If you've signed in and you have two-factor authentication on your Microsoft account, you've probably seen you have to get an app password specifically out of your Microsoft account. It's just a unique password for your Xbox 360 in order to be able to sign in, because you aren't able to do two-factor authentication or do that sort of same security that you can on the newer consoles. So that security issue could be a little bit of a drawback, but I don't see that being a reason why the Xbox 360 is discontinued anytime soon from online functionality on Xbox Live. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Bailey, and I will see you in the next video. Happy New Year.